got all these little ass guards. It just doesn't even make sense. And what do you mean reacclimate her? They need to get reacclimated to her, not the other way around. This is the Clark show.
Kelly, I wanted to touch.
Stop scrolling immediately, because Kelly Krauskopf has stepped in the spotlight again, and fans of Caitlin Clark are igniting a full-blown online firestorm. The Indiana Fever's president of basketball and business operations sat down for a widely watched interview with Quire and Company, and instead of cooling down the growing controversy around the franchise, the comments poured fuel directly onto it. She discussed the team's free agency plans, highlighted incoming draft talent, and then delivered a line that instantly froze the conversation across the basketball world. Krauskopf suggested that Clark will need to adjust a wave of new faces joining the roster, and that single remark shifted the tone from cautious optimism to outright tension. Supporters heard it as a reversal of expectations. Critics saw it as uncertainty at the top, and suddenly the narrative exploded into debate. What could have been a routine update instead became a lightning rod, amplifying concerns about direction, leadership, and how the franchise plans to build around its biggest star.
Plan for Caitlin Clark, because it looks like it's you guys' idea to try to build a team to win without her rather than getting supplemental pieces for her. I'm trying to understand what's going on. Okay, I don't understand the whole plan in terms of going into camp. The Fever have signed.
And that word, adjust, instantly became the flashpoint. That single phrase struck many fans of Caitlin Clark as dismissive. And within minutes, it ignited a wave of backlash. Because for the second time in less than a year, the executive leading this multi-million-dollar franchise sounded, to critics, like she expects the most culturally influential player in women's basketball to reshape herself to fit the system, rather than the system being structured around her strengths. Welcome back to Wnba Pro, the channel willing to dissect the business side of professional basketball without filters. Subscribe and turn on notifications, because what just came from Kelly Krauskopf is fueling a pattern that's becoming harder to overlook. Here's the context. Krauskopf returned to the Indiana Fever in October 2024 after serving as an assistant general manager with the Indiana Pacers. She previously led the Fever from 2000 to 2018, building the tough, defense-first roster that captured the 2012 championship. Her resume is strong, her reputation well-established, and on paper she looks like exactly the experienced leadership the franchise needs. Yet every time she steps to a live microphone, another avoidable controversy seems to erupt, and the conversation shifts from strategy to damage control.
Okay, because of her passing ability and because of her IQ, but Stephanie White wants the girl playing small forward. She wants her playing off the ball, so everything you're saying doesn't even matter. It doesn't even matter. Like, what are y'all doing over there?
She really creates.
And rewind to July 2025, when Kelly Krauskopf delivered an interview that poured fuel on an already tense conversation. She spoke about sustaining the franchise's explosive growth and emphasized that the moment was bigger than any single storyline, framing it as a long-term mission for the Indiana Fever. Then came a line that sent fans of Caitlin Clark into immediate backlash. She referenced foundational pieces in Clark and Aaliyah Boston, added that the roster would continue to evolve, and compared the goal to building an enduring national brand like Apple. That comparison triggered a fierce reaction, with supporters questioning why the messaging seemed to dilute the obvious reality that the league's most popular player is also the central driver of attention, revenue, and momentum. The online response was fast and unforgiving, with viral comments arguing that enduring brands typically lean into their defining visionary, pointing to how Steve Jobs became inseparable from Apple's identity rather than being treated as interchangeable. Others warned that constant messaging about adaptation risked sounding like the organization was reshaping its biggest star instead of constructing everything around her strengths. The criticism intensified, spread across the basketball community, and for days the discourse shifted away from on-court progress to questions about leadership priorities and whether the franchise fully understands the scale of the opportunities sitting right in front of it.
It's not that hard to play. You got to find the right players that kind of understand that, but it still does take time. There were moments last year when we were down the stretch where we were like,
and now here we are in April 2026, and Kelly Krauskopf is repeating the same pattern during her appearance on Quire and Company. She spoke about the stress of free agency, the challenge of evaluating more than 100 available players, and the complications created by a new collective bargaining structure that is routine executive language. But then she shifted to the incoming rookies and began describing them as pieces that Caitlin Clark will need to learn to integrate with, emphasizing players understanding how we go about it. The tone suggested to critics that Clark must adapt to the system rather than the system evolving around her strengths. Few in mainstream coverage are addressing how consequential that philosophy could be for the league's trajectory. Clark is not a typical young player trying to carve out minutes or a role player searching for structure. She represents a rare level of influence that reshaped attention around the sport. The Fever shifted from limited visibility to becoming one of the most watched teams in the league during her rise, and her presence has coincided with increased ticket demand, national broadcasts, and merchandise momentum. That is why this messaging resonates so strongly. Supporters view her not just as a key contributor, but as the central catalyst for franchise's surge, making any suggestion that she must simply fit and feel like a fundamental misunderstanding of the moment.
But positionally for us, we were really focused on a guard. We were ready if that wasn't available, but we were focused on a guard. And Raven was one of those guards. So defensively, certainly somebody that can back up Caitlin, that is going to be on a rookie scale contract for a long time, that can grow into our team long term.
When you have a player with that level of financial and cultural gravity, you do not frame the conversation around her adjusting. You frame everything around maximizing her impact. That is how championship organizations historically operate. The Los Angeles Lakers structured years around Kobe Bryant. The Golden State Warriors built their identity to amplify Stephen Curry. And the Dallas Mavericks centered decisions on Luka Doncic. In those models, the generational star becomes a gravitational core. The roster is designed to complement her strengths. The coaching philosophy is tailored to elevate her game, and front office decisions align with long-term growth around that centerpiece. What many Fever fans believe they are hearing from Kelly Krauskopf sounds like the opposite approach, where Caitlin Clark is framed as one component rather than the central engine. To be fair, there have been smart moves, re-signing elite scorer Kelsey Mitchell to a major deal, bringing back Lexi Hull and Sophie Cunningham, adding front-court depth with Monique Billings and Maisha Hines-Allen, and drafting Raven Johnson at 10th overall. Individually, those decisions make basketball sense. The concern raised by critics is not about the moves themselves, but the philosophy being communicated. Whether the team is positioning itself as a balanced roster that happens to include Clark, or acknowledging that the franchise's current scale, visibility, and momentum are largely tied to her presence. Fans recognize the difference, and that distinction is what continues to drive the debate.
The plan with the second and third round draft pick, they will probably get put on the developmental side, and ultimately how Caitlin Clark is going to have to kind of get reconfigured into the offense and how.
Stay with me, because this is where the situation intensifies. Every time Kelly Krauskopf speaks publicly, the reaction seems to escalate, and the communications team is left managing the fallout. The Apple comparison sparked backlash. Draft night messaging created more tension, and now this latest interview adds another layer to an already sensitive moment. Patterns matter, and critics see a consistent one forming. At the same time, head coach Stephanie White has discussed the idea of Caitlin Clark playing off the ball and referenced Raven Johnson as a true point guard, which only amplifies perception that the franchise centerpiece is being asked to adapt rather than being treated as the focal point. When both the team president and head coach publicly emphasize adjustment and share control, fans interpret that as uncertainty about the organization's direction. The response is already visible. Promotional pushes are met with hesitation. Comment sections fill with calls for clarity. And supporters are demanding a firm acknowledgement of Clark's central role. With the season opener approaching quickly, the pressure is mounting. The path forward is not complicated. Deliver a direct, unambiguous message that the Indiana Fever are built around Clark, that roster decisions are made with her strengths in mind, and that the franchise is committed to maximizing her impact. No comparisons, no layered corporate phrasing, just a clear declaration that defines identity, restores confidence, and resets the narrative before the season begins. Right now, the absence of that clear message is exactly what continues to fuel fan frustration, and if the front office does not address it soon, the entire 2026 season could be overshadowed by questions about whether the organization truly recognizes what it has. Supporters point out that Caitlin Clark has handled everything placed in front of her, returning from injury, delivering strong international performances with Team USA, and maintaining a professional tone toward coaches and teammates. From that perspective, the expectation is simple. The franchise should publicly affirm her central importance and remove any doubt about its direction. Instead, critics argue that acknowledgement has been inconsistent, allowing speculation to grow louder each week. That is why the conversation keeps intensifying and why WNBA Pro is calling attention to it directly. If you want